Nutrimedical Report with Dr. Bill Deagle and Tim Alexander, Lord Sterling. Dr. Bill will be right back in just a second. We have a lot to cover today in terms of developing news. The economy is one of several major things. More and more across the world, it's looking like we are headed towards a absolute global collapse, probably September or October. Is that Dr. Bill?
It is. Dr. Bill has arrived.
I started without
the Tim has arrived early. So, Tim, where are we in the news?
Well, I was just going. We've got, there are, I just did a second update to my news block Europe. There are 23 nations around the world where stock market crashes are already happening. And really, to a large extent, the total collapse, only the date is unknown. Here's what one article outlines that two predictions can be made with reasonable confidence. The stock market is likely to be halved, and that may be optimistic. Only the date is unknown. Secondly, the economy will eventually resemble the Great Depression. Again,
who's saying this now?
The date is unknown. Huh?
Who's saying this?
Hang on, and I will tell you that in just. That's Zero Hedge.
Zero Hedge. Now, I have three questions for you. The first is, number one, is Zero Hedge, are they Christians or are they prophets? Number one.
No, but I think they're Christians.
Number two, do they have understanding of the extent of the power levers and agendas of the globalists? Have they quoted specific meetings from the Bilderbergers, the Deagle International Settlements in Basel? Right. Now, the third question I have is even more significant. Are they aware that this is a controlled demolition like the Sands Hotel in Las Vegas, or the World Trade Center and the Oklahoma City bombing, which is a demolition?
They link a lot of different stories.
They realize it's a conspiracy.
Their writer is,
Right. Okay.
I don't agree with everything they say, but they're pretty credible.
Are you aware of a thing called Agenda 2030?
Yes.
Okay, and Agenda 2030 is an update to Agenda 21.
Yes,
which, by the way,
His Holiness the Pope will be here.
His Unholiness, the false prophet, is going to be meeting with not only both houses of Congress, but also with the United Nations, and endorses cap and trade and Agenda 2030, which is an 80 to 90% world population reduction, a collapse of the world economy, a one world currency, a one world religion, where Islam and all of the religions are under one roof, basically controlled by the World Council of Churches
they
and the
won't
United
have
Nations.
Me there, but
right, but they want to make a publicly sanctioned, you would call religious system. Well, what I'm saying here is we're staring the face down the road, and again, remember, if the currencies are contracting because of the international bankers and the stock markets are crashing, as I've said before, I don't believe in the Gerald Celente that it's all going to crash like at once. But if we get a cold and have a 20% devaluation of the dollar, or 30%, which is, I think, within reason this fall, other currencies are going to crash completely. And we're already seeing that with the Chinese stock market and other stock markets and commodities markers, et cetera, are going to go crazy, which means with extreme weather, which they're now predicting from this El Nino, that it's going to be the worst since 97.
By the way, they're saying that most of the United States will have a horrible winter, very cold, lots of snow. That includes here in the American Midwest. And if any of your listeners have a lot of money, please send me some. I'd like to move someplace warm. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. That's funny.
It's going to be the Old Farmer's Almanac, which has an extraordinarily good record, believe it or not. They say this is going to be a hell dinger of a winter.
Well, what will happen is we're going to see what's called extreme weather, where the jet stream, which ordinarily moves weather systems along, is gone. So the northern jet stream, you're going to see what's called polar vortices pulling down extreme cold weather this winter, and then it'll disappear. You'll see hot days in the wintertime, and then you'll also see extreme weather systems that'll sit over an area and cause massive flooding. They predict that this September we're going to get massive flooding in the southwest. It's supposedly in drought. And all of this means world famine, as I've said before. The birth pangs formally start this fall. And what the Pope is about to literally announce, because he's already made rumblings, is don't bother about abortion. He's doing nothing about the gays within his own church, okay, nothing of substance. He's not talking about letting priests be married, which would be the first step in cleaning up this mess.
Absolutely, but, it's not on the agenda, is it?
Right. Well, no, the fact is that we have to understand that we have the anti-pope in there. We don't have a pope, we have an anti-pope, we have a false prophet. And what's going on, if we look at these signs, and we talk about this with carrot bars, the replacement currency that they'll save your body, or Christians should get into right away, is carrot bars, because all other currencies are going to be amalgamated to one. It's called the mark of the beast, where there will be no physical cash anymore after they crash it, and they will devalue the currency to the point, and the only way you'll be able to buy and sell is through biometrics. Either a tattoo on your body, biometrics from your iris scan, your digital fingerprints, or Hertz body scan. The Bible warned us against this, and people need to start grasping that God's warning is coming. And
by the way, I've completed my sign-up process, so I should be able to put a link to your carrot bars on my blog.
Right.
What's so fascinating about that is it allows people for maybe $60, $58 to buy a small amount of gold. Maybe it's only a gram, or you can buy 2 or 3 grams.
It's not just gold they're buying a value enhanced, because you're just buying a gram of gold. You can go to a broker, but you can't use that gold for exchange. We're going to have gold vendors. We're applying to be a gold vendor. Nutrimedical is right now, not at the end of the year. We're applying right now. We're also applying to be an electronic carrot bars vendor, which means if carrot bars itself doesn't at the international level do it, we're doing it, where we're going to be literally setting up a carrot bars bartering system. And, of course, later if corporate says, hey, we want to take this over, we'll be more than cooperative to talk about carrot bars in Stuttgart, Germany. Well, either way, we're going to do it.
You need to have gold, silver. You need to have food. You need to have Nutrimedicals. You need to have, things like if you have dogs or cats, food for them. You need to have as much as you can. And I realize that probably the majority of people listening to this just don't have any spare cash.
Well, they better start getting ready for the fact that if they have equity in their home, try to get some of it out and get it into carrot bars. Number 2, they better start realizing not just carrot bars, they need to have maybe some gold and silver coins, lower denominations. They need to have food supplies like our PrepareWise foods, because we're going to have famine. They need to have a greenhouse, which they can even put on the side of their house, no matter what climate, even if it's a 20 by 10 foot out by 20 foot, 30 foot long on the side of their house toward the south side of their home. And
I recommend people get out of 99% of the stock market. The commodities, though, may be good. Gold mining stocks. Things of that nature.
Well, the gold mining stocks won't be good for a while. I'll tell you why. Because the powers that be, and this is George Soros. You know what he just did the last few days? He's buying gold up by the tons.
And his farmer partner is also doing that, which signals to me that if you're into gold mining stocks, that is one thing that may keep its value and may in fact sharply rise.
Well, it won't rise. No, I'll tell you why, Tim. It won't rise until the system is about to completely collapse. What's going to happen is, physical gold. People are paying a premium in China, India, and elsewhere, where a lot of places it's illegal, but the governments are still allowing it under the table because they want their population. So China is sequestering gold, and there are people trying to say they have more gold than everybody. We in America, in Alaska, have the largest gold mine on the planet with more gold in the ground than you can imagine, more gold than Midas's gold, or the gold of Ophir, or the gold of South America. The next largest mine is in Williams Lake, Canada. The Russians have some pretty good-sized gold mines, but the biggest are here in North America, Alaska, and north of Williams Lake.
Good.
I was a doctor there. I can tell you that mine in Williams Lake, British Columbia, is crazy phenomenal. But Tim, we're in very momentous times, and I'm an optimist. I think, what we are, if we are in God's will, and what God is always sufficient. And I want people to understand that unless you have front and center the power and position of the rules of the Ten Commandments and the Most High God, you cannot prosper in this world, whether or not it's protecting the unborn, whether it's having a credit-based financial system that forgives debt, whether you have a system that doesn't poison the land and gives a Sabbath rest not only to the physical body and soul, but also a Sabbath rest to debt, which is why the Shemitah year is there, the Jubilee year, whether or not you're having a system of a credit so that you don't have nations going to war. War is primarily caused by debt, by loss, by lack, by stealing, by suppression. And it's the underdog nations and peoples that often are the ones that now become the most vile. For example,
can I give you an example of that's happening right now? The European migrant crisis. Right. There's a sharp surge in numbers. In July, last month, there was a record high of 107,500 migrants at the European Union's borders, mostly from Syria and the Balkans. Of course, Syria, they're literally, by the way, advertising Christian women for sale as sex slaves.
Right.
And I can confirm that not only from a story that I picked up on, but from 3 Orthodox bishops from there that were at a conference some people I know went to just very recently. And, I mean, it's just, we got to remember, okay, we have Christians who are being martyred, and the women are being raped, et cetera, because they're Christians. And our tax dollars is supporting this. Our tax dollars are supporting the whole this whole scam, this ISIS scam, which was set up by the United States CIA and the Israeli Mossad, funded by us and with support from the UK, from France, also from Saudi Arabia and Qatar, and from Turkey. And we live. I mean, it's shocking to think. I mean, we have a large number of Christians being martyred today, and even more shocking, our government is partially responsible for it, our tax dollars. And where's the shock? Where's the people in their churches just sitting on their hands?
Let me give
how about those Kardashians? What's the latest?
Let me give the prescription. I've had what I call a lot of devil attacks that have tried to slow me down from doing the things I want to do, and I've already announced that I'm in the process of preparing several federal lawsuits. The first one that God commanded me to do, and there's several in the train, is to file against the smart grid system because it's tied directly to Agenda 21. The second lawsuit will be dealing with the unborn, which is Roe versus Wade. It is not a system that's going to be solved. It's nice to have a pro-life president, but it's going to be solved when we have a pro-life pro se litigant action, not with lawyers, pro se litigant action that eventually forces the Supreme Court to listen to experts, biological and medical experts, to prove that as soon as a fetus is conceived at the ovum and the sperm, which doctors have known for centuries, it is a person. It has personhood rights. We talked about this with Dr. Fred Graves.
You know what my late wife used to say about this, and I for a while I used to argue that, well, at an early stage is not a human being. And she said, no. She said, it's not going to be a parakeet or a cat. Not going to be a kitten or a puppy.
Well, it's genetically distinct.
It's a human being.
It's also not the mother's body. The mother may house it and has a uterus to house the body of a fetus, but it's not her body to dispense with. This is one of the great psychological, convolutional tricks that are made. And women don't realize that if they literally abuse themselves, it's a form of self-hatred, the so-called feminist movement. Women in many cultures, like the Viking culture and the Scottish culture, where my family and British culture, women had high ranking, in fact, in many ways higher, and were revered more than men in many ways, not only as shield maidens, but also within the community. The problem is that there's a lot of self-hatred going on, which is why a lot of lesbianism, a lot of the so-called abortion movement, is women hate the fact that they are childbearing and they become instead burdened with the idea of creating the next generation of the human race.
When you have
that's self-hatred. Now here's the consequence. Let me finish, Tim.
Go ahead.
The consequence of this is that women will literally remove themselves from the human race. Now, people say, is that possible? Yes. 93% of the abortions on the planet are sex-selected to kill female fetuses. Did you know that? 93%. So when women want to push for abortion around the world, whether you go to Vancouver, Canada, or Toronto, Ontario, or Europe, or Delhi, India, almost all the abortions aren't because of birth defects or Down syndrome or whatever. They're because they don't have a handle on the ultrasound. Okay? So they have the ultrasound and they have the abortuary right beside it. So when they talk about this, and people will say, well, that won't happen. What about when they decide to have Agenda 2030?
China and India in particular.
Yeah. Right. What happens when you have 120...
helps to take care of the parents when they get old.
Right. Well, we now have approaching 100 million excess males in China that can't have a bride unless they go to Palestine or Malaysia or somewhere else to get a bride. In fact, Mao Zedong, you know what he said to them? And the people's afterward in the People's Republican Army when there were no females? Except in the rural areas where they just said, to heck with you people in the Communist Party, we're going to have females. So they estimated there were somewhere between 30 and 40 million excess females that never had citizenship and didn't have birth records in rural China. Did you know that? And what they would do with the females is they would stuff their mouth with rice if they were born female and they didn't know, and let them freeze to death outside, suffocating on rice expanding with their saliva. Now, let me tell you what's going to happen here. Females, listen to this, okay? Because I'm telling you prophetically, scientifically, and as a doctor who knows everything about abortion. Everything, okay? You will remove yourself from the human race. What you'll see is the globalists want a vastly reduced human population where the drone class are unisexual. They're neither male nor female. They may be even hermaphrodites for all we know. But whatever they want to create, they don't want them reproducing, and they want them, if they do reproduce, to submit their gametes to a laboratory after they're licensed because they do specific activity, and their specific genetic clone or progeny will be certified by the state. They don't need females, to be honest with you, for your future, for most of the population.
But that's not God's way, and that's not really going to happen.
Yeah, but only the upper classes that are genetically enhanced, we call mitochondrial and genetic protofection, and interface with the supernet, and we call the connected brain, we want to call it like cyborgs. They will be the only ones that will be actually physically reproducing by natural means. Wild reproduction, I use this term because I want credit to given to me by anybody who quotes this in the future, will be controlled. And when the Pope talks about Agenda 21 and Agenda 30 now, which is what their new term is, was Krulig, K-R-U-L-I-G, and America One, which he's been an advisor to Obama even before he became president, and has met with him about the America One program, which is to build 12 super cities for the reduced population by 2025.
So all the slaves can line up and
2025, only 65 million Americans exist out of 319 million now, because we've either left the country, left this world, which means we're dead, etc., or died from massive disease, famine, or God knows what. That's their plan. If you think the women are going to be around in the future, think again. Welcome back. Cyanide thunderstorms, fear as mystery deepens around 1.5 billion Tianjin.
Yeah, and here's a real question about that. That warehouse wasn't licensed to hold anywhere near that much cyanide, but in China, it's a payola type deal. But the real question is, was that a naturally occurring event? Or was that a warning shot to the Chinese to stay out of the coming war in Syria and Iran?
Let me just insert some, what I call the part of that 90% of knowledge that I know that if you're listening in China or Russia, you need to take this seriously. Yes, you can wipe all American cities with your nuclear weapons. And yes, you have advanced biological weapons, which the Russians have the best biosuits on Earth. And yes, the Chinese have the largest mobile army on Earth, but they can't project it. What America has is weapon systems that are centuries ahead of anybody, including the Russians. And those weapons can trigger off earthquakes. They can use rods from God depleted uranium. They can do all kinds of things to trigger off crop failures and superstorms and weaponize the planet. And yes, there's 5 nations that have climate modification technology, and the Russians are next to the Americans. But America, with its giant budgets and its black op for more than a century, is way ahead of everybody else. The only country that could counteract America is Russia. China can't yet. And Russia doesn't have the ability to project forces a long distance with logistics. We do. But they do have the power. We have the power to cause havoc everywhere. We can shoot the missile guidance system on the launch pad in North Korea of a missile system. We can fry it in its entry or re-entry phases.
We already did that.
Right. So people need to understand we have weapon systems that would make Darth Vader in the 25th century drool. That's how bad.
And that's totally true. Of course, it also depends on Is it an immediate, all-out, total destruction of the planet?
But they want to have, as Joel Skousen says,
does it evolve for a while?
Yeah, Joel Skousen is right on about one thing about this, and I agree with him on a lot of stuff. That the globalists are setting up America to fail and to succumb to a world government because our military bases are struck and our population centers are under nuclear threat, and we will surrender to an international coalition of forces to a world governed by a united world empire army.
I doubt that we'll call it surrender. I think they'll
call it something else. We'll
wrap it in more flowery language. Right. But we are really stressed out. And by the way, there's been I think about 15 war games recently, and the Pentagon has looked at them, and they have come to the conclusion that we are not really prepared to fight a conventional or more than a conventional war with Russia right now. We don't have NATO doesn't have anywhere near the sufficient number of guided air-to-ground missiles, et cetera. We're pretty strung out. Where Russia has strength, Russia no longer is the Soviet Union, and she can project a nuclear power or something, atomic weapons around the world. But in terms of her strength is in Europe, okay? And she's prepared to fight, in effect, a defensive war with forward deployment into Western Europe if necessary. We don't have...
But by the way, the nation that we need to really watch, that people do not understand, and I'll say this again, is it's a real hell. Now, it's a little tiny nation, smaller than New Hampshire. But I'm going to give a list of weapon systems. You ever heard of a thing called ImageSat?
Yep.
It's a classified weapon system, imaging system that's better than ours in space, better than anybody's. They have weapons-based platforms, the Israelis. They have more weapons than anybody else except us and America and Russia. They're number 3 on the planet. Way more than Japan or anybody.
Little tiny country.
Little tiny Israel. They also have the most advanced biological and genetic weapon systems. They're working on scalar, genetic, harmonic weapons. They have thermobaric weapons. They have microwave weapons that can, when the bombs blow up, they cook you from the inside, which, by the way, we gave them. We're donating tons of money to Israel to develop advanced laser-based and what's called particle beam weapons that hit missiles.
You're completely 100% right about all that.
And you have to understand
if all this goes up, they're a small target, and if they end up fighting Russia and/or China, they will be vaporized.
Yeah, but what you have to understand about Israel is Israel has what's called a Samson option, and I'll explain what Samson option means. Samson option means they pulled the temple of Dagon down overhead, and all the high priests and everybody died in the temple. Israel has an approach that if they are going to be annihilated, they're going to annihilate the world. Israel can hit any place on earth, including American cities. Israel can hit and destroy Russia. They can even invade the Russian defense system. So Israel can vaporize every Chinese and every Russian city. Israel can defend and destroy anybody, including every Muslim city, and as they die, they will kill everyone else. They also have weapon systems, biological, scalar, and others, that nobody else has, not even us. They've stolen all our weapon secrets, and they've advanced them. I remember talking to one of the Israeli jet officers who told me this is classified, that they would order our jets, this is 20 years ago, empty and put their weapon systems in and wouldn't tell us what they had. It's called wire-guided missile systems that the Israelis invented were like 30 years ago. They wouldn't tell us what they were doing. They have all kinds of Israeli symbology inside these jets with all kinds of weapon systems that we don't have. And they soup the jets up like crazy, so they get operational performances that we don't have in our jets or the Saudis or anybody. So people need to realize we have a super predator class people that are completely crazy, and if it looks like they're going to lose, they're going to kill us all.
Well, I always say as an analyst, you need to step back from the trees and look at the forest, and then step back from the forest and look at the whole broad part of the world there, and even step off the planet and look down. And when you do this, you say, damn, that's satanic,
Right, and they also have nuclear bombs in every Capitol building, in every legislature area, on every country on Earth. So if it looks like the Samson option... I don't know every country, but the major ones for sure. Every country on Earth, they have them in their consular offices in the center of cities and near the legislative areas of every country and every capital on Earth. And if it looks like they're going, they'll send the activation codes to blow up those nuclear bombs, and those city cores are vaporized, even if they don't send a missile.
Some ways to get around. There are some defense.
No, they can shield them. Let me tell you,
I know,
the Israelis are very clever.
Look, we have allowed this.
Listen, Tim, I have inside tracked information. They went over New York City a year and a half after.
I know.
With a helicopter and a radiation detector. And do you know the two places where they found a whole lot of radiation around New York City? Let me tell you what they are.
The Grand Kills, the UN, and the consulate.
No, the Israeli. They basically, it was the Israeli consular office in New York City. Had a ton of radiation there detected from space coming out of it. Number one, so they'll blow up the whole area. And number two is Greg Kill's site where they actually took the debris from the World Trade Center. That's where they found a ton of radiation. So the Israelis basically are prepared to destroy themselves and kill everybody around them. And people don't understand. They're serious. They're not going to screw around.
Well, and the thing is, if it was just saying, okay, look, this is strictly defense, and you mess with us, but we're not going to mess with you. But that's not the situation. They mess with everybody. They control our Congress. They control our White House. They control our Supreme Court. 4 out of 9 of them are Jewish, and another one.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think that the banking system in Russia is or is not controlled by Sabbatean, Satanistic, Babylonian, Talmudic Jews?
The answer is yes.
Yeah, exactly. That follow the Cepheid Zyra and the all of the ancient Babylonian texts of the demonic Kabbalah.
Well, I think they are facilitators for the Antichrist.
And do you think the banks in China? The only 3 nations that don't have that is Cuba, which is, by the way, going away because we now have these new trade deals. We have Iran and North Korea, and that's it.
Used to have Libya, but
they're gone. They're history now.
Yeah.
They're vaporized. They're now 18 tribal groups fighting each other and killing each other, and it's not safe for international companies like China used to come in and even manage their oil fields. It's not safe. They had tens of thousands of Chinese engineers managing the place, and now all that business is gone, and their primary water from the desert is gone. I want to give a prophetic announcement here. I want to say I've been praying for months to ask God. I said, "What's going to happen, God?" Because my great-great-grandfather actually went from Damascus, Syria to China twice a year, okay, and he was Syrian. And I have Lebanese Coanic background. I can tell you I have an organic knowledge of what's going on there. And the Lord told me that when Syria falls, because it will, it's going to fall, because the Russians are going to fall back to defensive postures and diplomacy, which is what's happening. There's no military operations happening. You don't see Russian troops there. Yes, they're selling these MiG jets, these 8 MiG-31 jets, because this is basically putting more cards on the table to say, let's come to the table and make a deal. What Putin is saying, because he's a strategist, not an idiot, is he knows he doesn't want to engage in a physical war because their currency is already devalued because of the moves by Obama and the world banks to literally flood the world market with so much oil, and because Russia and Iran haven't helped. And the amount of oil coming out of Saudi Arabia, and the reason why it's so much Saudi Arabia did this, because there's even more oil being pumped than we realize. So there's a glut in the market. The price of oil may drop as low as $30 a barrel from my experts that have sent me reports. So what I expect to happen, whether it's the IDF or America or Turkish troops, I expect to see the fall of Syria by this fall. And I asked, what does that mean, God? And God said to me, and this is in prayer and in visions and dreams at night, he said, it means the peace treaty. And isn't this timing? It's the Shemitah year, it's the Jubilee year, where not only the wipeout year, where not only wipe out debts, but if you do not repent before God, he sends judgment. And so
on the 4 blood moons and all that.
Right, on the 4 blood moons. So what I expect to see is the fall of Syria, the removal or the execution of Bashar al-Assad, the setting up of a proxy government, the fall of the power of the king of Jordan at the WAFT that says, hey, yes, we'll finally, because they control the Temple Mount, the king of Jordan, which, by the way, and people need to understand, the king of Jordan is a blood descendant of Muhammad. Did you know that?
So is the Queen of England.
Yeah, right. But anyway, he actually has the right and control of the Temple Mount. And
I almost bought a jumbo jet, I tell you, it was quite a plane.
So the Queen is actually a blood descendant of Muhammad. I didn't know that. But here's the important point. the Temple Mount and these peace treaties are tied directly to the fall of Syria. Because I watched the 60-minute special this last Sunday, and the largest World Food Aid Program under the United Nations, which, by the way, we pay a third of the world for supplying food to 80 million people, the largest refugees in modern history is out of Syria into Jordan. Jordan is being crushed by it. You see, literally,
but they're also going north. That accounts. By the way, when I was talking about all the migrants to Europe, Germany this year is expecting 750,000 migrants, desperate migrants.
But the only way to stop this massive rupturing from the Middle East, and by the way, we're doing weather warfare there because the place is drying up. I mean, even if they could grow
Egypt,
food,
the people are dropping like flies. It's been like
right. They're dropping because they're using weather bombing to destroy the climate there, so they can't grow food in Egypt.
Yeah.
So all of this is happening. And it's my
again.
This
in
is
line
again
with
a
what
thus
you're
saith the
saying,
Lord.
and you know that's
let me finish here, Tim.
In line with what you're saying,
let me finish what I'm saying here first.
Okay.
And then I want you to respond. Thus saith the Lord, and I don't know when it's going to happen, but I can tell you what I do know because it's limited. That when Syria falls, whether it's this fall or next year or whatever, the peace treaty will happen, and not a day before. When Syria falls and Jordan then allows the setting up of the Temple Mount it doesn't have to be a full-blown temple where you put a cornerstone. It can be the tabernacle of Moses, because the vision I had back in 1988 God showed me was a tabernacle with the Kohanim, the ashes of the red heifer, the kalal from the...
They've already bred the red heifer.
They have everything. They are prepared right now, and it is now a wipeout Shemitah Jubilee year
against Christ.
Yeah, and I can tell you right now, I also have this in prayer, that the birth pangs, which is not, remember now, the tribulation sounds like judgment, but remember, it's also the birth pangs of God bringing about a new civilization. Literally, he calls the temple of us as the living stones of the New Jerusalem. We, Tim Alexander, Dr. Bill Deagle, you out there, Sally Jones, whatever, we're all living stones of God's temple. We're the bride, literally, of the Most High God. And literally that process called the tribulation is bringing about the birth of this new world that's under God and under secular mankind and Satan. And the birth pangs...
That's what all this is all about.
The birth pangs start this fall, because without the birth pangs and the shedding of the skin of Satan over our world, which is going to happen, and they're going to try to, with Agenda 2030, which the Pope has endorsed now, which he says, don't bother about abortion, except gays and lesbians.
He'll be here on Yom Kippur to speak to us, by the way.
Really? Well, here's what's going to happen. Well, Yom Kippur, which is another evil date, People need to understand this, where they have Kol Nidra, where they pass over the sins to others, okay? What we're dealing with here right now as the signs that, and as I say this again to repeat, so it's not me getting credit, it's God, that the tribulation birth pangs start this fall. And whether it's this fall or next year or whatever, when Syria falls, the Temple Mount Peace Treaty starts. And by rabbinic law, and this is from Zafed and from Israeli experts I've talked to and communicated, the only way they can start the last 7 years is on the Feast of Sukkot after a Shemitah year. So it has to be in a Sukkot.
Now? Just about?
I don't know if it's this fall, but it has to be a Sukkot after a Shemitah year.
Let me say this now. Okay. In keeping with what you're saying, okay, there was a lot of complaints yesterday that the Syrian Air Force had killed 80 people in bombing a market. Right. Well, not too far from Damascus. Here's the real story. What they bombed was a poison gas warehouse. The ISIS has used mustard and chlorine gases against Iraq and the Kurds, which were produced by Turkish weapon of mass destruction specialists. They've smuggled them into Damascus from Turkey, and they literally were within rocket and mortar range of downtown Damascus. And the Syrian Air Force dealt them a little setback. But you realize that if you have sufficient rocket and long-range mortars of downtown Damascus, and you've got a dangerous gas warfare, you can take out the city. And I mean, we're talking about an enormous number of people dying.
Right.
And particularly the way Damascus is in a punch bowl, it makes it very vulnerable to both chemical and nuclear attack.
That's at a future date. I don't think you're going to see the nuking of Damascus yet. I think it's going to...
Well, no, I'm not necessarily saying that.
It's not a prophecy, but it's a prediction that'll happen at or beyond the middle of the tribulation.
Putting chemical weapons a little ways outside of Damascus is not only a capacity increase that's off the chart for the so-called ISIS, but it's an indication of intent. And
here's where I think this is going.
A big deal.
Remember, if the Pope and Obama, who's considered like a messianic figure, a religious figure, makes a deal with Russia, he really is.
Yeah, maybe on the dark side, yeah.
Well, yeah, exactly. But the people have literally taken a messianic view about him, and to make a deal with Russia and China because their economies are crashing now. And the reason why Russia has not engaged militarily...
You think that's an accident?
Right, and what's going to happen is, and I believe they're going to, quote, make a deal. In other words, that's why you see diplomacy, which is why Russia's not moving in militarily. They're selling 8 MiG-31 jets specifically to basically put more cards on the table to get them to make a deal. Because Russia's rubles dropped in half and the Chinese currency was devalued 2% by the Central Communist Party, but their stock market dropped 35%.
Russia has offered to make a deal with the Saudis because the Saudis are, as rich as they are really beginning to burn through a lot of cash now. Because remember,
that's not the problem, Tim, because you can always create cash.
But the Saudis aren't buying.
Let me explain this in the last minute here. What I think is going to happen is exactly what you're showing here. Syria is going to fall, and I think it's going to fall sooner rather than later. And when it falls, the Pope and the globalists are going to announce a peace treaty. Remember, the first half of the tribulation is not bad. It's going to look really damned good. It'll be, when they say, shall peace and security, as it says in the book of Hosea and the book of Acts, then destruction comes upon them suddenly. And it comes on them basically 1,260 days after Sukkot, when the sacrifice is cut off 30 days after Sukkot on Yom Kippur, after Sukkot, and 30 days later, the tribulation, the military, geopolitical disaster phase starts the last half of the 7 years. So look out. If the Pope announces 2030, and if we have a peace treaty after Syria falls, and they start a blood sacrifice on the Temple Mount on Sukkot, which by rabbinic law they have to after a Shemitah year, we're really, really, really close.
Yep. You're right.